2 years after the death of bin Laden, a special ops team that helped take down the terrorist leader was being secretly liquidated. Their entire families were wiped out too, no survivors. Years ago, after the team finished the mission, the government gave them new identities. But the hit squad didn't just know everything. Every single person involved in the op, they also had their current home addresses. It seemed they were hunting for something even more important. Only 2 members of the team are still alive, and Eric was the squad leader of that strike team. Right when he got home, he got an unexpected call from his old teammate Ben. Since that mission, Ben has been suffering from PTSD. He wasn't just struggling with addiction, he was living on the streets with nowhere to go. Until he noticed someone was using their old military photos to track them down. They were looking for clues at his usual haunts. That's when he felt the danger closing in. He told Eric to notify CTU immediately, because their covers were blown. After saying that, he hung up in a panic. To verify Ben's story, Eric immediately texted the rest of the team. But after waiting for a while, he realized no one was answering. At that same moment, he spotted a car parked not far away. Turning around, he saw several men approaching his house. He immediately rushed his wife to hide in the attic. He tried to call the police, but found his cell signal was being jammed. Once his wife was safe, he tried to grab his gun, but the assassins had already surrounded the house. Eric was captured on the spot. They started by demanding to know where his wife was. Eric lied and said she wasn't home. To his surprise, they demanded he hand over what was taken during the raid on the terrorist leader, the black box they had carried away. But Eric had no idea what that black box even was. Still, they insisted it was either with him or Ben, who had already fled. Because if the U.S. government knew about it, they wouldn't have left the team alone this long, which meant the feds were completely in the dark about its existence. Just as he was about to start the brutal interrogation, Nicole, who was hiding in the attic, threw a window frame from upstairs down to the ground. It successfully distracted the assassin. He quickly sent 2 of his goons outside to check it out. Nicole took the chance to open the trapdoor and jump down, hearing the noise coming from inside the house. Just as he was about to call his partners, Eric suddenly struck back, killing the leader on the spot. By then, Nicole had retrieved the gun from the safe. Another assassin walked in and was immediately gunned down by Nicole. With a weapon in hand, Eric moved in to take out the final assassin. The house was definitely no longer safe. The 2 of them had to flee in a hurry. Eric immediately reached out to Rebecca. Rebecca is the former director of CTU, the one who directly oversaw the mission years ago. Hearing that the entire special ops team was being hunted, Rebecca was in shock. She couldn't believe it. Since the only people who knew their identities were the CIA director and the Secretary of Homeland Security. Aside from those within CTU, the new CTU director was undoubtedly the prime suspect, because the enemy had searched every team member and still hadn't found that black box. The only possibility was that Ben had taken it. Eric's top priority was to find Ben. A man dug up a metal box from 200 meters underground and stashed it in his backpack. Immediately after he called, his wife telling her to pick up his mother and meet him at the train station. But as soon as the wife hung up, someone else was already pointing a gun at him. Aware of what had happened back then, how the team members who helped take out bin Khalid had all been murdered, Rebecca knew for certain there was a mole within CTU leaking info. She decided to have her subordinates launch a secret investigation. Using tracking data, they located the origin of Ben's last call. Meanwhile, Eric was taking his wife to his brother's place. His brother wasn't just a notorious crime lord, he had the manpower and firepower to keep her safe. This was the safest place. Based on the tracking info, CTU covertly deployed a drone for aerial surveillance. They quickly picked up Ben's trail. Rebecca alerted Eric immediately, but just then, the current CTU director caught on. Drones in the city sector were being deployed, so he came to check on the situation and was about to revoke their access. Rebecca was forced to take him out with a taser, knocking him unconscious, to buy more time for Eric. Little did they know, the assassins had also just figured out Ben's location. When he found Ben, Eric demanded he hand over what he took from bin Khalid's compound. Ben claimed there was only some cash and jewelry inside, not some black box like everyone was saying, but it was clearly more serious than they thought, because their entire team and their families had been wiped out. Eric pulled a box out of Ben's backpack. After searching for a bit, they found a USB drive hidden at the bottom. Plugging it into a phone, they realized it was a list, naming all the terrorists in sleeper cells across the city. Once activated, they would launch coordinated attacks nationwide. Just as he was about to report this to Rebecca, the phone signal was jammed again. The assassins had caught up to them. The 2 of them had to go on the run once more. In the chaos, they ran into an active construction site. Eric fired 2 shots to sever a cable, causing massive concrete pipes to roll down. Using the pipes as cover, Eric took the opportunity to eliminate the entire hit squad. When he got back to the spot, he found Ben had disappeared with the USB. He felt he'd sacrificed too much for the government already. If they wanted that USB back, they'd have to pay him $2 million. Otherwise, he'd sell it to the terrorists. For someone with a case of severe PTSD, like him, that was a very real threat. The problem was Rebecca no longer ran CTU, and she didn't have the authority to move that kind of money. So she went to the current CTU director, Keith, and informed him about the team being ambushed. She wanted him to access CTU's classified data to find out who had tampered with the team's files. But the bigger headache was how to come up with $2 million. Eric's brother gave him a tip that no one has more cash on hand than the cops. Just last week, they seized 100 kilos of drugs and $4 million in cash, and all that haul is sitting in the evidence locker. Eric suddenly had a bold idea. After the terrorist leader bin Khalid was killed, the members who took part in the old mission were being hunted and executed by his remnants. Even their families were being wiped out. No survivors. Eric luckily escaped death and decided to use $2 million from the drug task force to trade for the USB from Ben, exploiting racial profiling. He just had to walk down the street with a backpack and act suspicious when a patrol car passed by. The police would automatically come after him. Sure enough, a squad car hit the sirens and pulled him over. 2 officers stepped out, and without a word, they slammed him against the wall. They never showed any courtesy to people of color. 1 officer moved in to frisk him. Eric suddenly countered and disarmed him. The 2 cops didn't realize this guy was a total pro. He then handcuffed both of them to the car. He took explosives out of his backpack, rigged a simple bomb, and strapped the charges to the officers' belts. He forced them to take him into the station to get the $4 million seized last week. Those arrogant cops had never seen anyone this crazy. The narc squad headquarters wasn't some pushover place. It was filled with shooters armed to the teeth. But to get inside, relying on just 2 officers was impossible. The evidence room had multiple layers of security, and officers couldn't just come and go as they pleased. Besides, the place was packed with surveillance cameras. This job needed tech support from CTU. The 2 cops escorted Eric inside. Unexpectedly, as they reached the captain's office, he called out to one of them. Seeing the cover was about to be blown, Eric suddenly attacked the officers. The captain was forced to yell at the other 2, "Lock this lunatic up now!" At the same time, Rebecca's subordinate had taken control of all the cameras at the narc headquarters and put the old footage on a loop. The 3 of them quickly made it to the evidence room. Eric tied up the 2 officers first. Then on one of the shelves he found the $4 million that had been seized. Just as he was about to pack it up and leave, Field Director Locke, having just finished his mission, returned to CTU at that exact moment. The first thing he did upon returning was file his mission report. Because of this, the fact that they were detaining the CTU director was about to be exposed. They had to quickly find out who had accessed the Special Ops team's files. What shocked them both was that the intruder used Rebecca's own login credentials. This left Rebecca in total disbelief. After checking the intruder's IP address, the tech guy discovered the computer being used belonged to Rebecca's husband's campaign office, and the person assigned to that computer was her husband's campaign manager. Before the 2 of them could even react, their system connection was forcibly terminated. The camera loop was also cut off right then and there. Rebecca scrambled to call and warn Eric. At that moment, the CTU director walked in with his team. Without saying a word, he had the 2 of them locked in a holding cell. It turns out Rebecca's husband, a U.S. senator, was also one of the top presidential candidates. The woman in charge of managing his campaign was named Neela. Soon after, the opposition leaked information that Neela not only frequently visited a mosque with radical Islamic ties, but also had contacts within extremist organizations. At first, it seemed like a smear campaign by his rivals, but after the vetting team verified the claims, they found out the story was actually true. However, Neela explained that she went there to oppose the ideology of fighting violence with violence. She didn't want them using Islam as an excuse to spread hatred and brutality. And her explanation actually managed to convince the investigators. No one in their wildest dreams expected someone to have the guts to single-handedly storm and rob a police station. This was probably the craziest thing to happen since this precinct was first established. Because here not only is everyone carrying a sidearm, but they're also backed by heavy firepower. Anyone daring enough to try this must have a death wish. Unbelievably, he even threatened them not to move in. With a tactical team armed to the teeth blocking the door, Eric had absolutely no chance of escaping, so he decided to blow his own way out. He immediately took the explosives off the officer and rigged them to the wall. Hearing the explosion from inside, police began frantically trying to breach the door, but the evidence room used reinforced steel doors, making them impossible to break down quickly. By the time they finally burst in, Eric had already grabbed the $2 million and headed for the exit. However, the police chief had already ordered a lockdown of the building. The courtyard was crawling with cops. They were completely boxed in. They had to find another way out, but just then, the police had them surrounded. This time, there was no way they were getting away. In the middle of the standoff, the police chief suddenly ordered everyone to stand down. It turns out he was on the phone with Rebecca from CTU, and she had fully explained the situation. The crisis was finally de-escalated. Over at the counter-terrorism unit, after detaining Rebecca and Andy, they separated them for questioning. And both of their stories matched up perfectly. Based on the lie detector data, it didn't seem like they were lying. The director finally believed what they said, and Eric was officially cleared of suspicion. He told Eric that they had a car ready for him, along with a rapid response tactical team, set to ambush the drop site and arrest Ben. To finish the mission, CTU had mobilized all available resources. Eric knew full well that CTU sending Locke to supervise meant Ben was a dead man walking. Before leaving, he told Locke, "No matter what orders you get, Ben is a brother in arms who's been through hell with me. I don't want him killed on sight." At the same time, the terrorists noticed the hit squad. They'd sent all 5 of them were completely stationary. Only one phone was still on the move. If that phone wasn't with Ben, it was definitely with Eric. They just had to track that signal to recover the USB. Eric headed out with the money. He quickly heads to the station where he was supposed to meet Ben. Following Ben's lead, Eric boards the subway with the cash. Surprisingly, he was sitting just 1 car away. Ben flashes his piece, subtly warning him not to do anything stupid. He was still dreaming of the high life. But Eric knew he had passed the point of no return. The subway reached the next station in no time. CTU had the entire area under surveillance. The captain also had a team positioned outside for backup. But just as Ben was about to make the exchange with Eric, Locke, waiting in ambush, spotted 4 shady characters. It was clear they were there to snatch the USB too. He had to radio Eric with a warning. Gunfire immediately erupted between both sides. Taking advantage of the chaos, Ben attacked Eric and bolted with the cash and the USB. But he didn't get very far before a gunman caught up to him. The guy gunned him down and snatched the USB off his body. In the wake of 9/11, the U.S. established the world's largest counterterrorism hub and granted them massive jurisdiction. They pinned everything on bin Laden, but they never expected that. Years ago, bin Laden had already launched a sleeper cell program. It wasn't just local supporters, but also people in every profession who had been recruited. They were split into 15 to 20 groups, each with its own specific mission. Once activated, they would launch simultaneous attacks across the entire country. The recent tragedy at the port of Alexandria that shocked the world was carried out by their organization, resulting in over 200 casualties. Attacks like these could happen individually, or all at the same time. But no matter what, the consequences would be catastrophic. What's more, the enemy has the USB now, which will undoubtedly speed up their timeline. Meanwhile, Feta is still completely in the dark. Even though Ben's actions made Eric livid, they were brothers in arms after all, so Eric still went to the infirmary to check on him. Ben showed genuine regret for what he had done, because he realized that this could end up costing countless innocent lives. He tells Eric, he discovered the enemy's weapons are custom-made, and with that kind of mod, there's only one person who could have pulled it off. If they follow that lead, they might just recover the stolen USB. But the catch is, they have to dangle a bait he can't resist to get him to bite. He's hoping Eric will give him a shot at making things right. At the same time, the terrorists who snatched the USB realize it got damaged during the struggle. The data is completely unreadable. Recovering the data is going to take a long time. Rebecca led a special ops team to arrest Neela, her husband's campaign manager. But facing Rebecca's accusations, Neela insisted she wasn't even with the campaign team at that time. Every day after finishing her prayers, she goes for a jog at exactly 600 a.m. Meanwhile, the IP address was accessed at 6:05 a.m. Rebecca immediately ordered her staff to pull the surveillance footage from her running route. Not only was she nowhere to be seen, but on the contrary, at an ATM near the campaign headquarters, they found footage of her. Even though Neela swore it wasn't her, the evidence was clear, denying it was useless. The only person who didn't buy it was Rebecca's husband, because they found an old video of Neela at a mosque. In the video, you can clearly hear Neela speaking out against extremist violence. Because of that, he didn't believe someone like her would betray him. After having a colleague at the NSA scrutinize the visual evidence, he found out the image of Neela at the bank had been faked, and the only one besides Rebecca who could use her account was his own father. He couldn't believe his father would frame her without even blinking. This made him wonder how he could even run for president. The father said everything he did was for his son, because his company used to buy oil from terrorists, and they've been using that to blackmail him, threatening to expose everything. Compared to a presidential run, sacrificing 4 Rangers and their families was a drop in the bucket to him. John completely rejects this justification. Once the terrorists launch their attack, the death toll could reach tens of thousands. He decides to tell Rebecca the truth. To catch the terrorist leader's son, the counter-terrorism unit decides to go through an arms dealer who has been supplying him just to get close. But the deal is they have to offer something he actually wants. Eric suggests using the current missile defense system blueprints, tweaking them slightly before handing them over to the dealer. Before he even finishes his sentence, the CTU director shuts down the proposal. Given Ben's track record, he thinks it's just another excuse for him to make a quick buck. These top-secret weapon blueprints could fetch at least a few $1 million. He's not willing to take that risk. After the meeting breaks up, Rebecca double-checks Eric's intentions. Once she gets a straight answer, Rebecca goes to see Andy. This is a job only Andy can handle, and Andy definitely delivers. While Eric is in the interrogation room being questioned, his phone suddenly rings. It turns out Andy sent the blueprints directly to his phone. This means they have to move immediately. Right after that, Eric heads to the main server room and tosses in a smoke grenade. Then he goes to the medical wing, where holding Ben proved to be no trouble at all. He knocked out the 2 security guards. He decided to take Ben along for this high-stakes mission. Hearing the alarms and seeing the guards down, the director reacts instantly. Just as he's about to order a total lockdown, the camera feed suddenly cuts out. The smoke alarm in the server room was tripped, knocking out the entire CTU system. Shifting into auto-lockdown mode, Eric and Ben take the chance to slip out of CTU. While CTU is in total disarray, Eric surprisingly reaches out and calls in. He says once he makes contact with the arms dealer, he'll ping his latest location to CTU. He tells the team that they can have a tactical team assembled and standing by for his signal. Things have come to this, they just have to roll the dice. The commander orders Locke to gear up the team immediately and head out by chopper. Eric and Ben arrive at the meetup spot in no time. At first, the other side doesn't trust Ben, but once they see the classified blueprints, he decides to take them both to see his boss. Upon meeting him, Eric realizes that Ben and the arms dealer, Gabriel, worked a job before where Ben ran off with the money. That's why he still holds a grudge and doesn't trust him at all. Gabriel hands a revolver to Eric. Only if he takes out Ben himself. Will they even discuss the deal further? But Eric would never go through with that. They served together and swore an oath of loyalty. Even with a gun pointed at his head, he doesn't flinch. To his shock, the dealer makes a sudden move, killing Ben on the spot. In another development, Henry has confessed to John. Neela is immediately released, while his father is brought into CTU headquarters. Surprisingly, he denies everything flat out, completely taking back what he said before. These are the latest U.S. missile blueprints. Unbelievable that a soldier stole them to sell to terrorists. Just as he's about to inspect the goods, Eric launches a surprise attack. With just a few moves, he takes down both guys. He gets straight to the point. Eric wants the address of the terrorist leader, Abdallah Khalid, the one buying these weapons. Surprisingly, the guy sticks to his code and refuses to talk. Eric pulls out his phone to alert CTU, but right then, Gabriel sneakily hits a panic button hidden in his watch. The goons outside realize something is wrong and rush in to bail him out. A heavy firefight breaks out immediately. At the same time, CTU agents on 2 choppers show up just in time. Even though the rooftop was crawling with the arms dealer's thugs, any resistance was futile against the overwhelming firepower. Meanwhile, the battle inside was reaching its end. Eric opened fire and gunned down Gabriel, neutralizing him completely. Right away, Eric picked off the henchmen rushing in one by one. Hearing the heavy gunfire outside, Gabriel knew it was game over. Refusing to give CTU a chance to interrogate him, he pulled a knife and ended his own life. This move was completely unexpected for Eric. He didn't think Gabriel would go to such extremes. The paramedics rushed in but couldn't do anything. Agents checking the computer also discovered that it used biometric recognition technology. Any unauthorized login would trigger an automatic data wipe. Eric immediately grabbed the laptop and ran over to Gabriel's body. Only by using his fingerprints could they stop the data deletion process in its tracks. Luck was on their side. The CTU team quickly found crucial info on the computer, passports they had used, and locations where they had conducted deals. CTU ordered them to head there immediately. Eric also temporarily joined the raid team. But while the team was en route to the bust, a sudden news report aired footage of their shootout with the arms dealer. They had intended to keep the news under wraps, but a civilian had caught it all on camera. The terrorists saw the news report as well. They realized CTU likely knew their location. Bin Khalid ordered all data on their devices wiped. Any documents they couldn't take were to be destroyed. They retreated immediately. The raid team quickly arrived at the target site. Every entrance to this building was sealed tight. It was impossible to see what was happening inside from the outside. The squad split into 2 groups, storming the front and back doors simultaneously. Locke's team breached the door and rushed in, but the room was already deserted. Furthermore, all evidence at the scene had been completely destroyed. The area was heavily wooded and satellite imagery couldn't track their escape route. Every lead had gone cold. At the same time, there was a pair of siblings, suddenly received a series of activation codes. This meant they were cleared to launch the attack. Unexpectedly, their conversation was overheard by the father. The moment the father tried to stop them, the son suddenly snapped, knocking his father to the ground. Immediately after, the siblings tied their father up. Who knew even a terrorist could be such a simp? 3 terrorists were planning an attack on a massive scale. These 20-plus crates were all packed with high-intensity explosives. Once detonated, it would claim millions of lives. Just as everything was ready, the guy with the glasses suddenly pulled a gun. He felt he could face death himself, but he couldn't stand to let the woman he loved do it. He believed the girl was only doing all this because her brother was forcing her. He decided to help the girl break free from her brother's control. Seeing the girl circle around behind him, the brother tried to rush forward to stop her, only to be gunned down instantly by the man in glasses. As the man in glasses was about to finish him off, the girl stabbed him in the back. Then she stabbed him again. The man in glasses was in total shock. Before he could even turn around, he took another hit. That's what happens when you're a simp. And the brother finally bit the dust too. The girl went back to say goodbye to her father. She decided to complete the mission on her own. Despite her father's loud begging, the girl strictly turned her back and left. To stop his daughter from going on a suicide mission, the father struggled to rock the chair violently, eventually knocking himself to the floor. After a frantic struggle, he finally managed to break free. But when he ran to the warehouse, he found his son and the professor lying dead. Cradling his son's body and thinking of his only daughter left, the father broke down in silent agony. After checking the scene, he discovered their target was the George Washington Bridge. He immediately called the police. The counterterrorism unit just got the word, quickly verified his warning. 2 years ago, they immigrated to the U.S. from Chechnya and rented a truck 3 days ago. The counterterrorism unit immediately pulled the surveillance feeds along the route, while simultaneously scanning all passing vehicles. Thanks to their big data screening system, they quickly tracked down the target vehicle. They scrambled a satellite to lock onto and track it, while contacting Highway Patrol to intercept the suspect. At the same time, they notified the police at the Bridge Authority to handle the situation, giving orders to terminate on site. The 200-pound officer was a little on edge, but he handled it like a pro. As the target vehicle came barreling toward him, with the suspect's hand white-knuckled on the detonator, the big officer nimbly swerved through the lane and slammed right into the front of the target car. The car spun out and was forced to a dead stop. The officer cleared the crowd while checking on the driver. It looked like the guy was a goner. Seeing that, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. But just as he went to pry the detonator from her hand, the girl suddenly snapped back to life. That's what happens when you don't double tap. At the same time, the counterterrorism team was on their way to Eric's brothers to pick up his wife. Little did they know an ambush was waiting for them. Isaac rushed in to help but was captured as well. Faced with overwhelming firepower, his men had no chance of a rescue. The man behind this was Jadala. He was doing this to avenge his father. The terrorists decided to activate sleeper suicide bombers embedded across the U.S. However, the USB drive they had snatched back couldn't be activated due to corrupted data. Meanwhile, CTU not only had the world's most cutting-edge computer systems, but also the sharpest technical minds. This is why bin Khalid kidnapped Eric's wife and brother. He was using their lives as collateral to force Eric into fixing the USB drive. With no other choice, Eric turned to Andy. As a soldier who had sworn an oath, he knew all too well that if that USB was ever decrypted, just how bad things would get. So he decided to have Andy write a virus using this repair job on the USB to completely wipe the data inside. This meant that for both of them, there would be no going back. But Eric made it clear, as long as it saved his wife and brother and shut down bin Khalid's attack plan, he was willing to lay down his life without a second thought. He thought Andy would say no, but surprisingly, he only hesitated for a second before jumping on board with the plan. It's in times of crisis that real heroes step up. Andy went back to grab his laptop, but the move caught Locke's attention. While the two were in the car, coding the virus, Locke suddenly showed up, intending to stop them from going on a suicide mission. However, Eric reacted just in time. The two of them overpowered Locke and tied him up. Then they immediately headed to the meeting point. The other side kept their end of the bargain, releasing his wife and brother to wait until the two of them had safely left. Only then did Eric drop his weapon. Meanwhile, Locke managed to untie himself and get free. He immediately called the CTU commander, ordering a trace on Andy's car, and at the same time, sending a tactical team to hook up with Locke for orders. Meanwhile, the two Eric just rescued were driving Andy's car back. But the terrorists weren't going to let them off that easy. The goons sent by bin Khalid quickly caught up to him. The two scrambled to get away, but they drove into a dead end. So they had to ditch the car and hoof it, ducking into an abandoned factory. They then took the chance to ambush the hitman following them. Luckily, there were only two of them. Thanks to Isaac's aggressive counterattack, one was dropped on the spot. The other was pinned down by both of them. Right after that, he called in his crew. Even though they were street thugs, they knew exactly how dangerous the terrorists were. They decided to go raid their hideout to rescue Eric. In another twist, Eric's group was taken to the terrorists' lair. Bin Khalid ordered Andy to get to work immediately, recovering the data from the USB drive. But before that, he forced him to explain every piece of software on the computer to one of his henchmen. After ensuring everything was clear, Andy started working on the USB. He quickly activated the virus hidden in the computer. Just when he thought the data was completely wiped, Bin Khalid dropped the news. The USB he just sabotaged was a fake. It was just a trap, meant to flush out the virus he had hidden on the machine. This allowed his tech guy to neutralize the virus, leaving Andy with no choice but to recover the real USB. When Andy refused, Bin Khalid grabbed a dagger and stabbed him in the thigh. Then he started twisting the blade. How could an office worker endure this kind of torture? He was forced to agree to recover the data. Ask yourself, could you handle being stabbed like that? What would you do if they started twisting the knife? Andy couldn't take the pain anymore, so he gave in and agreed to restore the list, even though he knew that USB would be used to activate sleeper cells across the country. But when it's a fate worse than death, hardly anyone could hold out. After roughly bandaging his wound, Andy ran a 4-stage recovery algorithm. The first stage finished quickly. Once the program cleared the remaining 3 parts, the data would be fully restored. Eric knew they were running out of time. Seeing a crate of grenades nearby, he made a desperate attempt to stop them. He managed to pull the pin on one with great effort, but Bin Khalid's man tossed it outside. It caused no damage at all. Instead, Eric was quickly beaten to a pulp by them. At the same time, the Air Force received new orders from the White House. High Command reported that fighter jets had been scrambled. Once the target coordinates were locked, they would immediately initiate a strike, obliterating both the terrorists and the list. But doing so meant the 2 of them, their own people, would be buried along with them. The team leader said he couldn't do that, but higher-ups insisted that this course of action had already been cleared by the Department of Defense. All he had to do was send the coordinates to the airbase. Locke's strike team was locked and loaded, but then they suddenly got a new directive from the Air Force, telling them to stand by just to clean up the mess afterward. Knowing this call came straight from the White House, Locke was fuming, cursing out everyone in the administration, but his hands were tied. On the other side of things, a familiar face suddenly appeared among the terrorists. His name was Sang Biao, someone who used to play both sides between the U.S. military and bin Laden, a total double agent. Meanwhile, the remaining 3 parts were almost done processing. Seeing that Eric was no longer useful, Bin Khalid pulled out his gun to finish him off, but right then, his brother Isaac stormed in with his crew. A massive shootout immediately erupted between the 2 sides. Bin Khalid never expected that the henchmen he sent out would fail to take those 2 down. Caught off guard by the ambush, the terrorists quickly took heavy casualties. In the middle of the chaos, Andy grabbed a phone intending to call for backup, but he was stunned when Rebecca told him that in just 5 minutes, DoD fighter jets were going to bomb their exact location. By then, Eric had been rescued by Isaac. Once they got the word, everyone started hauling ass out of there. They barely cleared the building before the missiles hit. Luckily, everyone made it out alive. The big boss, Bin Khalid, was quickly snatched up by Locke and his team. But while combing through the scene, there was no sign of his accomplice. Bin Khalid was in custody but wouldn't say a word. It seemed like he had planned for this all along. The officer in charge of transporting him suddenly got a call he thought was from his girlfriend. But when he opened the video link, he saw a girl covered in strapped-on explosives, and it was indeed his lover. His mission was to bust Bin Khalid out. CTU used call analysis technology and managed to pick up a signal sent from the scene right when the explosion happened. They suspect that the call was made by the defector. Under CTU's guidance, Eric quickly tracked down the address of the person registered to that number. He brought along 2 special ops soldiers, splitting up to breach the front and back doors. To their surprise, only a woman was inside. She acted absolutely terrified. Eric asked about her connection to the guy, but the woman insisted she didn't know him. Seeing her pathetic state, it was hard not to believe her. Would you believe the terrorist leader Bin Khalid isn't actually dead, and he's gearing up to target the U.S. to carry out a crazed revenge mission? Nothing would be more shocking than executing a senator to spark a massive wave of panic. The terrorists boldly showed up right at CTU's gates. The mole cop told the security guards that they were there for server maintenance. After he entered the security code, the guard let their vehicle in. As soon as he hung up the phone, the cop pulled his gun, turned around and walked into the duty room. He quickly took control of the 3 staff members inside. Right after that, he headed to the interrogation room to uncuff the suspect. After finding an excuse to dismiss the officer in the hallway, it's revealed the man he's rescuing is actually the son of the late terrorist leader Bin Khalid. The terrorist group infiltrated CTU specifically to break him out. They even planted bombs along their escape route. Meanwhile, Eric followed the intel provided by CTU to a certain house. Little did he know, there was only a panicked woman inside. But as soon as they let their guard down, the woman suddenly attacked. Luckily, Eric managed to shoot and take her down in time, but by then she had stopped breathing. When he went down to the basement, he made a major discovery. Another woman was locked up down there covered in explosives. What's more, she was being monitored remotely. Seeing this, Eric didn't dare get too close, fearing he'd alert whoever was watching. After snapping a photo of the bomb strapped to her, he immediately retreated and reported the situation to CTU. The boss definitely wouldn't kidnap a woman for no reason. To figure out his game, they had to disarm the bomb strapped to her first. Meanwhile, the fat cop had already sent the CTU floor plans to them. That's why the earlier scene went down like it did. CTU hacked into the network of the house where the woman was being held and put the security footage on a loop. Eric followed the instructions to personally defuse the bomb on the girl. But the bomb on her had been fitted with a vibration sensor. She was so terrified that her whole body was shaking uncontrollably. Eric had no choice but to keep calming her down. Finally, he managed to safely remove the remote detonator. But just as he was about to help her out of the bomb vest, the girl panicked and tried to bolt. That exact move triggered the vibration sensor on the vest. They only had 10 seconds before it blew. Eric pressed the girl on why the boss wanted to kidnap her. She gave up the fat cop's name. Since he was a married man, no one knew about their secret affair. CTU immediately locked down the entire building. All eyes were on Eric. That's when they realized the surveillance feed for Jadala's cell had gone dark. Hearing the news, Rebecca grabbed her gun and gave chase. She quickly cornered the cop in the stairwell. Rebecca told him that Eric had successfully defused the bomb vest. He didn't believe her at first, but Rebecca lowered her weapon to show she was serious. But just as the cop was about to drop his gun, the terrorist boss appeared right behind him. They quickly hauled Jadala away. Who would have thought they'd run right into Rebecca's husband at the exit? After gunning down his bodyguards, they realized they'd just hooked a much bigger fish. After all, a senator is worth a hell of a lot. By the time the SWAT team caught up, they set off a pre-planted bomb. Despite the police setting up multiple roadblocks, they still couldn't stop them. In a dark alleyway, the terrorists pushed an old man forward. When Jadala got a clear look at the man's face, he was absolutely stunned. That person is none other than the terrorist leader, previously thought to have been taken out by the U.S. military, Ibrahim bin Khalid, who is also Jadala's father. It turns out that all these years, his father has been quietly masterminding a new attack. Only when his son got into trouble was the old man forced to step out of the shadows. And thanks to this turn of events, he realized his son is finally ready to inherit his legacy. Immediately after, they gave Rebecca a call. The mission to eliminate bin Khalid years ago was personally led by Rebecca, and she even received a medal for that achievement. Jadala told Rebecca that they've decided to broadcast to the entire world the execution of her husband. They see it as the ultimate payback against America. However, her husband isn't their real target. If Rebecca wants to save him, she has to trade her own life for his. So Rebecca went to see Eric and filled him in on her plan. This isn't just about saving her husband. It's also a chance to take down Jadala. Eric is the only person she trusts right now, since the CTU director would never sign off on a plan like this. Meanwhile, Andy got a massive lead from the rescued girl. An incredibly vital clue. When the kidnapper had him cornered, he made a phone call, and Andy overheard the phrase East Julie. Andy immediately had his colleagues run cross-agency search on that phrase. Just then they discovered Rebecca had vanished, along with Eric. Director Mullins immediately ordered his team to check Rebecca's last call. Realizing she planned to trade herself for her husband, he ordered the police to intercept them both. Before long, the police spotted their vehicle. Unable to shake them, Eric waited for the car to take a turn and jumped out. Then Rebecca pulled the car over. Just as the police swarmed to arrest her, Eric appeared from behind and knocked them out. The two of them managed to slip away. Meanwhile, the CTU team traced East Julie to the Director of National Intelligence. It was a subfolder on his server. He used the highest CTU clearance, but he still couldn't open the file. This forced Andy to find another way in. Rebecca arrived at the stadium exactly as planned, while Eric lay in ambush at a different spot. Bin Khalid forced her to walk out to the middle of the field, threatening to shoot her husband if she didn't. But Rebecca knew all too well that she was the one they really wanted, because executing her would carry much more weight than killing her husband. So regardless of their threats, she stood her ground and demanded they release her husband first. Seeing her about to turn and walk away, he finally ordered his henchmen to let John go. It wasn't until Rebecca saw them dump John out of the vehicle that she finally felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Eric thought she could leave right then and come up with another plan later. But Rebecca believed this was the best chance to bag bin Khalid. So without hesitation, she walked toward the center of the stadium. Halfway there, she realized something was wrong. The enemy had soaked the field in gasoline and set up cameras nearby. They were going to publicly execute her right there. The boss forced her to read her confession. Rebecca threw the paper straight onto the ground. Seeing that she wouldn't submit, he lit a flame to threaten her, and that very fire gave away his position. Eric decisively opened fire and took him down instantly, but it also ignited the gasoline on the field. The henchmen rushed in to attack Eric. Eric didn't want to fight. He only wanted to save Rebecca, but they managed to snatch her away anyway. Everyone could only hear her horrific screams over the radio. The veteran, posing as the senator's bodyguard, planned to infiltrate the Pentagon. Do you think this plan is feasible? Eric presented his ID for scanning, but the system flagged an error. This made Eric's heart skip a beat. The guard told him to try it again, so he had to take out his phone and try once more. Surprisingly, he made it through without a hitch this time. The person the senator wanted to meet was the director of national intelligence. As soon as the two of them turned to walk into the office, Eric immediately followed them inside and quickly pulled the door shut. Before the bald guy could even react, Eric had him pinned down. Just moments ago, Andy had secretly tipped off Rebecca and Eric that he had tracked down the files for Project East Julie, an operation that was personally overseen by the Director of Intelligence himself. What's more, he also found information regarding the terrorist leader's daughter in those files. The U.S. government had supposedly killed his 10-year-old daughter, which was why he was so hell-bent on working for bin Khalid. But as Andy tried to dig for more clues, the system kicked him out. The data inside likely contained the secret location where the boss was hiding, making it the key to saving Rebecca. But since the director's office is inside the Pentagon, breaking in seemed impossible. The only person with the clearance to get in was Senator John. To save his wife, John was obviously willing to do whatever it took. However, they had no idea that, while the two of them were on their way here, the director already sensed something was off. So he secretly checked his computer. It turns out the boss's daughter wasn't dead. They'd been holding her captive the whole time. They wanted to use her as leverage to force him to betray his organization. But by doing this, they were acting no better than the terrorists themselves. If the truth ever came out, he'd be facing serious prison time. So he pulled out his phone and called an encrypted number. The person on the other end was one of Rebecca's former subordinates, Sim, who handles the government's dirty work, leading a group of mercenaries who walk the line between good and evil. Sim ordered them to get to the safe house immediately, destroy all evidence, and promised a $500,000 payout. Back to the present, Eric searched the director and found the encrypted flash drive. After scanning the guy's fingerprints, he handed the weapon to John to keep watch on the bald guy while he plugged the drive into the computer. This whole situation helping Andy gain remote access to his computer. Very shortly after, they discovered a major lead: live camera feeds from the safe house. That's when they finally realized the truth. The girl hadn't been killed. They'd been keeping her prisoner all along. If they could rescue the girl and prove to Nasiri that his daughter was still alive, there might be a chance to save Rebecca. But the bald guy claimed, "You won't find anyone at that safe house." He knew that if the evidence vanished, they couldn't touch him, and everything in those files would be nothing more than a theory. This set Eric off in a blind rage. John quickly stepped in to hold him back, reminding him that the priority was saving the girl and Rebecca. Meanwhile, Rebecca, bound in the back of the vehicle, managed to grab a piece of broken glass. Gritting her teeth, she slashed her own wrist. She refused to let herself be used as a pawn by the terrorists. Suicide was her only way out now. But Nasiri spotted what she was doing almost immediately. He ordered his men to give her emergency first aid right away. "It won't be that easy to die," he sneered. This was payback for 9/11, orchestrated by bin Khalid to strike at the heart of the U.S. government. With the whole world watching, they planned to publicly execute the woman who masterminded Operation Neptune Spear. Meanwhile, at a CIA safe house, Eric took out the guards outside and stormed the room to subdue the agent, who was watching the girl. The whole point of this mission was to rescue the girl the CIA was holding captive, simply because her father was a top confidant of bin Laden. But just as he was about to get her out of there, Andy warned him that 4 heavily armed contractors were incoming, closing in fast on the safe house. Seeing the downed guard, the hitman realized someone had beaten him to it. Finding out it was just one guy, he didn't hesitate to finish off the guard. Eric barely had time to hide the girl in a closet before he was under fire. A fierce gunfight erupted through the windows. Eric cut the lights in every room, giving him a temporary tactical advantage, and successfully took down one of the henchmen. But the enemy still had 3 men left. The leader planted a bomb on the wall. Then 2 of them decided to split up and attack at the same time. The second the bomb went off, one goon charged in through the front door, but he was met with Eric's heavy suppressive fire. The other guy took the chance to storm in through the blast hole to attack. At that moment, Eric ran out of ammo for his handgun. Waiting for the leader to step into the room, he tossed a flashbang. Right after the bang, he lunged out to engage him in hand-to-hand combat. Just as Eric was about to get the upper hand, the female assassin who was injured earlier suddenly walked in. Eric had no choice but to put his hands up and surrender. As the leader signaled to execute him, his phone suddenly rang. To his surprise, John was on the other end. John knew the leader was a former subordinate of Rebecca's, so he informed him that Rebecca had been kidnapped by terrorists, and this girl was the key to saving Rebecca. Only then did he realize it was a case of friendly fire. After hanging up, the leader and the female assassin left immediately without looking back. At the same time, a live broadcast appeared on the Jihadi network. Everyone at CTU was in shock, staring at the screens in front of them. The person about to be executed was Rebecca. Having just been captured, the enemy was streaming through an anonymous server, making it impossible for them to trace the address. As soon as the indictment was read, the execution would proceed immediately. Right in the middle of the live broadcast, Nasiri suddenly received a mysterious call. When he answered, he was surprised to hear a familiar voice on the other end. No matter how ruthless a terrorist is, he still has a weakness, and a daughter is always a father's Achilles heel. Eric told Nasiri that his daughter was still alive, and he could return her to her home in Yemen, on the condition that he saved Rebecca. If he didn't comply, Eric guaranteed he would never see his daughter ever again. Very soon, Rebecca's indictment was finished. Zadala ordered Nasiri to carry out the execution personally. Nasiri held a knife to Rebecca's throat, but then he suddenly flipped the script and immediately took the leader hostage. Nasiri demanded that the anti-terrorist unit take his daughter to the Yemeni embassy. Only after confirming his daughter was safe would he agree to hand over Rebecca. So the special ops team brought his daughter to the embassy. Meanwhile, Eric followed the address provided by Nasiri to reach the hostage exchange site. Through a video call, he saw his daughter with his own eyes being handed over to the Yemeni embassy staff. Once he knew his daughter was safe, Nasiri released Rebecca. At this point, Nasiri was still caught up in the joy of reuniting with his daughter, completely unaware that the U.S. government would never let him walk. Just as Rebecca was about to reach Eric, a gunshot suddenly rang out. Nasiri was gunned down on the spot by Eric, but it was a double cross within a double cross. Zadala, the one Nasiri had just been holding hostage, fired a fatal shot from behind. Even though Rebecca was rushed to emergency care, they couldn't save her life.